Yeah, there's a lot. There's some of our old friends there, isn't there, with business process re-engineering and a few things like that. But there's a couple
Yeah.
of new things. So generally, it's performance measurement, improving tools. This word here again, strategic fit. It's a bit unfortunate because the word fit gets used interchangeably with strategic alignment and all this stuff. So it's yet another model of how your supply chain needs to fit in with your customer needs. And it was that zone of strategic fit. Somewhere in here it says achieving fit and challenges of maintaining fit. Where are we? We'll get onto it. So value added outcomes. We've done value added many times. So it's either reducing costs, isn't it, or adding more sort of differentiation, better features, better service. Reporting to management, and how do you match supply with demand, which is partly what we've done. You know, it's do you have lean, do you have agile, do you have stock, do you have better forecasting, do you work with the customer? So if you can eliminate and understand supply and demand, you can match it up, and if you don't, you're in trouble. And obviously one problem with not matching supply and demand is you get bullwhip effect, and you get shortages, too much stock, out of stock. So it's pretty general area, this one. I don't know if I've put this in the notes, but I've added this because the study guide wasn't that clear, so I thought we'd just go through what value added was.
Yeah, you've got it in the guide.
Great. So some of the study guides, not this one, talks about when you do project appraisal, do a benefit cost analysis, which doesn't sound right to me. I always think it should be a cost benefit analysis. But if the benefits are higher than the cost, that number's bigger than one. So if your returns are more than your cost, the number's bigger than one. Value added, or value, if you're doing value engineering, is functionality divided by cost, or worth divided by cost, or value of all the benefits divided by the sum of the costs. And the study guide actually calls that the cost effectiveness ratio. So really is what are you getting for the cost you've incurred? How effective is it? Function is how well it does its job, so you can improve quality or reduce costs. And if you're adding value, we need to be efficient and effective. The study guide mentions productivity, which is inputs over outputs. And an example of productivity measures is like Nissan cars, say at Sunderland, they might produce 65 cars per hour or 50 cars per person or something. And supply chain productivity is just output over inputs. So that's fairly basic measurement stuff. The study guide has a very strange three sort of balloon thing here, saying strategies you can adapt to add value are developing people with competencies, using technology, and using processes that give consistency and timeliness. Fairly obvious stuff, but it's not an easy heading to have remembered. So I'd maybe store that as a essay point. Supply chains and corporate performance. The study guide on 255 talks about customer value and the marketing mix, which we did last week. Remember what the marketing mix was on Sunday even.
On B.
It was the 4 Ps.
Yeah, but wasn't it done by someone with a surname called B?
Oh, I see what you mean. That's a good question. I don't think it's attributed to someone marketing mix.
Oh, is it not? Okay.
We had quite a bit of stuff with Cotter, didn't we? Who else did we have? There is someone with B, but not the marketing mix. So product, price, promotion, place, because you're trying to create value for the customer. And if you get that right, you're producing value that they'll pay good money. We're trying to increase shareholder value, and we're trying to fulfill demand, which is pretty obvious what supply chains are about. Shareholder value, people get awfully confused. It isn't just about making profits. It's about improving the share price and giving maybe dividend growth, but particularly share growth. So we can increase shareholder value through increasing revenue, lowering costs, managing working capital, or managing fixed capital. And shareholder value can come in the form of profits, but it's generally growth in revenue and share price. So I might get no dividends from a company, but if the share price doubles, that gives me shareholder value. We need to report data timely. Why? Again, pretty obvious. So we can make decisions, so we can benchmark, so we can control, so we can respond. It gives us stability. Pretty obvious things, I think, of why we need to report data timely. But it can be a problem reporting in companies, can't it? Systems, wrong metrics, too many metrics. Data can be not valid, it might not have integrity. And we'd want different reports to what the director wants, to what the team leaders need. So it's getting that level of reporting right. And then 4 challenges, I think, are mentioned in the study guide. But fairly common sense once you've seen the headings. Data obviously is diverse, and we did this in the data analytics, didn't we? There's many types of data. There can be behavioural, transactional, geospatial, where you're located, public records. So there's a whole raft of data. One I particularly like from the Audit Commission, although there's millions of these about, and I've put NISG there. Data should be accurate to the extent it's fit for the use. You don't want something to 10 decimal points if you only want it rounded to nearest pound. It must be valid, must be reliable, must come at right time. It's no good finding out after, and it must be relevant. The headings are almost self-explanatory, but they're features of good quality data. And if data doesn't have them qualities, then it's no good. So that's not in the study guide, but I think if you're talking about data, that's a nice, easy one to read.
Yeah, you've got quite a good one in your notes where it's actually the acronym accurate.
Yeah, there's a bigger one, isn't there? Yeah, and that is better if you can remember it. Yeah, so don't go from both. So accurate's fine. It just gives you a few points, don't it, you can throw in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just thought it was too big for the slides, to be honest, so I put the 6th one in. CIPS talk about benefits of data analytics in the supply chain, that it can save time and costs, it can give added value, it helps us understand customer demand, and it gives us insights and efficiency. So that was pretty much like your L6m4 benefits of data analytics. You can foresee, you can establish trends, you can anticipate, you can, yeah, all that stuff. But how do we match supply with demand? Very difficult. It can be very complicated because of volatility and complexity. How can we make supply chains respond better? The study guide suggests that we do PLC planning. We need to know when the product's growing, maturing, dying. With all good ERP systems, we should do sales and operation planning, where leadership and teams meet to ensure each business function is aligned. It requires collaboration, and we might have quarterly objectives and reviews. Yeah. SOP, I've put that in because I don't think it detailed in the study guide. There's different models around, but how do you do sales and operations planning? Start with a forecast, plan your demand, plan your supply, have a pre-S&OP meeting, then the executives will sign it off, hopefully, and then you finalise and implement it. It's not written in stone, that could be an Oracle one or somebody's. The study guide shows the input-output model, which isn't that useful, but it does show the throughput rate. Guess what is how many you make over time? So 10 per hour, not rocket science. But there are some measures, I don't think I've put them on the slides, of work in progress and throughput time that are in my notes. How can we be more responsive to demand? Well, we might need reactive capacity. But can you see what's happened here? This is that bullwhip effect, where the customer demand is going up a little, but the demand to the factory goes up a lot. So if we look at the bullwhip effect, we've got 3 suppliers here. Well, the OEM is supplying the customer, who demands 100 a week, who buys from the first level supplier, who buys from the second level, who buys from the third. And because we make 100, the stock 100, so we have a week's stock. Right. But what happens if suddenly the customer orders 95? Well, the OEM who makes them says, well, they've only ordered 95, so therefore I need to reduce production to 90 so that I'll have 95 at the end of the month for the next month's requirement. So rather than make another 100 or 95, they make 90. And that will leave them 95 in stock for next month. So because they've ordered 90, oh, it's going that way, I'll have to do it the other way. Because they've ordered 90, the first tier supplier who stocks 100, their demand is 90. So they say, oh, we better only make 80 so that we've 90 in stock for next month. I won't go through theirs yet. Then the second tier supplier gets an order for 80, but only makes 60 to make sure they don't stock too much. Going back to the third tier, they get an order for 60, but only make 20. Now, if we carry all them numbers through, you can see the OEM produces 100, then 90, then 95. So they catch up within a month. 100, 90, 95, 95, 95, 95. But if you go right back the supply chain to the third tier, they make 100, then 20, then 180, then 60, then 100, and finally 95. The demand goes up and down and amplifies the further back you go. And that's simply by them all not knowing what each other's doing and making a month's stock. So can you see how that's changes? I can go through that again, but if you just do that one going backwards and then the others work the same.
Yeah.
It's quite a good example. You will never have to put numbers to it, but it does show the first tier supplier catches up after week 3, and the second tier supplier takes them till week 5 before their demand levels out.
Mm-hmm.
So the poor guy at the end, their demand's going up and down for 5 weeks because they get an order for 100, then they got an order for 60, then they get an order for 120, then 90, then 95, and it settles down. So it's a bit of a mess. What's that?
Whereas if the third level supplier knew what the OEM was doing,
if they all knew, they wouldn't have done what they've all done, would they? It would have been much easier for them just to slowly adjust from 100 to 95. They could have probably gone down to 90 probably, and then slowly adjusted to 95. But if they'd all shared that information, they would have known there was a permanent decrease to 95 and could have coped with it. So it's lack of visibility, lack of coordination, and people sort of second guessing, not making to demand. And that's bullwhip. It's quite a good one from Slack, that, isn't it? I quite like that as a worked one. And I'll send you that obviously on the PowerPoint. You can see they've put it on a graph there, which complicates it. But you can see the customer demand only blips a little, but the supplies demand, because of bullwhip, goes up a lot. It's not true demand, it's false demand because they're overreacting.
yeah.
There's the metrics. I did put it in the slide for measuring supply chains, throughput rate, work in progress. Not a fan at all of Little's Law. It's in the study guide. We've done stock turns before, cost of goods sold over average inventory.
Yeah.
And you want that number to be as high as possible. Like if it's 12, it means you're turning it over once a month. If it's 24, you're turning it over 24 times a year or twice a month. So stock turns, as opposed to stock days, is a measure of how efficient you're turning your stock over. and your inventory cost is your inventory cost divided by how many times you're turning over your stock. They aren't going to give you any numbers. And I've done a little bit of maths there on inventory costs. If the inventory costs are 30% and 6 turns a year, and the unit inventory costs are 5%, inventory turns are a good indicator of how effective an organisation is. So higher inventory turns, less capital tied up. Lower inventory turns, more capital tied up. So it's just a metric. They aren't going to give you a 25 marker. The study guide mentions reactive supply chain management. And it talks about recognise, create the team, develop the plan. Sorry, it doesn't. It talks about, yeah, it does reactive, revise the plan, analyse and learn. And it's really reactive risk management, but the study guide has called it reactive supply chain management, where you find a problem and then you try and deal with it. In the same article, it says what you're better doing is being proactive in managing supply chain by initiation, identifying risk, assessing, mitigating, implementing, monitoring. So the study guide shows that process, but really it's managing risk. But risk could be excessive demand or reduced demand. So providing you've planned for it, you'll be better prepared. So you either react to the new problem like that, or you have contingencies in place. And that's the full slide from the article that the study guide refers to. And can you see ways of mitigating risk in supply chains? Collaboration, more agility at the bottom, avoiding risk, postponement, don't convert it into finished product until late, hedging, create a supply chain risk culture, carrying stock, collaborating. So there are many ways of managing risks in supply chain. You don't need all the stuff around it, but I thought it was quite a good slide for showing you the big picture of managing risk in supply chains. And then we're on to the usual stuff on KPIs and benchmarking, balanced scorecards. So KPIs there, we've got the 4 domains of the balanced scorecard: financial, customer, process. And we've got the red, amber, green for each month as to how well the measures are coming up to the targets. And there's some measures there on the KPI column. OTIF, on time in full. KPIs for the supply chain are generally broader, and these are the measures that are important other than the financial ones as per study guide: perfect order, fill rates, cash to cycle, inventory days, and customer order cycle time. So you do need them 5. Perfect order is exactly where it says, but order fill rate is like service level, how often you can ship from stock when it's demanded. Cash to cash is exactly where it says. The cash is the number of days between payment and receipt of cash. And there's a formula: trade receivables plus stock less trade payables. And then the customer order cycle time is the number of days it takes to supply the customer from receipt of order. So there's 3 measures of those explained in more detail. A bit boring, aren't they? But they are going to be useful.
These in your notes as well, quite a lot of detail on them on your notes. So
there is, Claire, yeah. It's pretty mundane, isn't it? But you think, okay, if I had to talk about KPIs for supply chain, you could go down cost, quality, reliability, flexibility, but obviously if you can come with some specific supply chain ones like these, even better. So these are more supply chainy than purchasing. Technology can help communicate. Yes, we can use EDI. We can use tightly coupled system or loosely coupled systems, so the integration levels can vary. And there's some examples there of Microsoft BizTalk and MuleSoft, which are enterprise system integration. Not a big fan of all that, but you need a basic sort of overview of SOA.
Yeah, that's a bit I looked at and was like, oh, that doesn't ring a bell with me. It doesn't.
Right.
I was very comfortable with.
Yeah, I'll maybe, it's probably one maybe to come back on Sunday, maybe, is that, isn't it? I think, as a little topic, you think?
Yeah.
Because it is a bit of a pig. We know what ERP is. It can be anything you want it. Can have all them modules. It's an integrated database. It's flexible, it's modular, it's comprehensive, and it goes beyond the company, communicates with suppliers. It can be web integrated and also known as collaborative commerce. And it's about sharing information. They mainly use XML and SOAP technology. Considerations. Yeah, just a general list, isn't it? Benefits of ERP. Yeah, we're all on one system. It's quicker. We can do simulation. One truth, isn't there? Everyone's got the same details. I'm sure we could come up with benefits for that. Barcodes can be useful in supply chains, which you did in the data analytics. We can use RFID. Integration strategies. I don't really get this at all. They've sort of made it up, this slide. They've said, well, in the supply chain, you might have MRP. You might have DRP, which is more logistics. You might use JIT, and you might have direct product profitability, which isn't really a strategy. It's a way of measuring profitability of individual products. So I've put a slide there on DPP, and I'm pretty sure I've got a video on it, Claire, and it's trying to calculate the actual profit achieved by a retailer from an individual product, not just from what we paid for it to what we sell it at, but what does it really cost us to bring it in and move it through the warehouse, store it, pack it, get rid of it. So it allocates all the true costs. So it's a bit like, I suppose, activity-based costing. It identifies the true profitability of a product. So if it ties half your warehouse up, half the warehouse costs should go to that product. So it's a more sophisticated way that's used in sales. The study guide talks about safety measures such as technological safety, reputational safety, financial safety, and physical safety. And they've put them in that middle balloon of the iron triangle: quality, cost, and time. A very odd sort of viewpoint on measurements of safety. I think I've gone down accidents and all that as well, because do they mean safety of supply? I don't think they know in the study guide, Claire, what they mean by safety. But if you have a glance at that in my notes, you'll see that.
We just, like, the little bit I wasn't too sure about, and I haven't covered yet because I haven't done a data and analytics one.
Yeah.
Big I and little I.
Yeah.
Like, you've got a very simple sentence describing it. What would be an example of those, just so I can get it in my head what they mean?
Well, I think probably Big I's a bit of a dream that it's everyone on the same system, sharing the same software, and it's fully integrated. Whereas most systems like ERPs, you interface with your suppliers and you've all got your own systems that can talk to each other. So ERP is generally little I, that you've all got your own systems that can talk to each other. But Big I would be like a virtual enterprise where you're sharing the probably cloud sort of based software and databases.
Right, okay.
But I don't think anyone's really Big I. Would you really want to be a supplier who only used your customer systems? I doubt it. So, you can go from everybody fully integrated to sort of integrated, but converting with interfaces information from one system to another. So even though you might have all that SAP 3, it doesn't mean you've probably Big I, if that sort of helps a bit. Benchmarking, they've got the usual list, just they've added a couple to it. They've got process there and strategic. So they've just slightly tweak some terminology there. So there's 6 there. But you're more likely to get the questions, problems of, and how you'd use it. So I've put a slide together. What are the problems? Finding a partner, time. You know, it's not always easy to understand why someone's better than you, even if you know they're better than you. So there are many problems. Balance scorecard appears again with the 4 perspectives, and we had a slide earlier with some measurements and KPIs. That was pretty much measurement. This is location and CPFR and BPR. So a bit technical again. I'll go past that. Location, Yang and Lee suggest those are the factors that influence where you locate. I think I've done a separate slide there. Yeah, access to markets, access, but again, pretty common sense. Some of them can be pivotal, some vital, some important. So some are game changers, some are just would like to haves. So in the article from Yang, they talk about some things might be pivotal, some might be vital where you locate, some could be important, and some could be secondary. So, you know, if you're logistics, pivotal might be access to motorways and ports. Secondary might be skilled local community where you can employ people from, maybe. So there are different factors. I think we looked at the Mendel slide last Sunday, which talks about factors to consider when you're designing your supply chain. And can you see phase 3 there is desirable sites, which would depend on infrastructure and what production method you're using. And location there below it. Doesn't give you a lot of detail, but the Shopper and Mendel book goes into a lot there. Not in the study guide. Done that slide on flows. How do we optimize the supply chain? Well, generate the options, analyze them, business case, sign off, implement, monitor, control. A fairly mundane process, I think there. It's almost project planning, isn't it? Yeah, there's nothing really new there other than it's a process you would go through. The methods we can use for NOM, which we touched on very briefly on Sunday, linear programming, centre of gravity, minimum spanning tree, and maximum flow. I can't see for 1 minute that you'd have to explain them for, but it would be quite useful maybe to say there are 4 mathematical techniques: linear, centre of gravity, minimum. I don't think I would go much more than that.
Those 4, because I've just read this bit in your note.
Yeah.
And there's 2 techniques. You've got mathematical and simulation models. So those 4 there are all mathematical, yeah?
I would say so, yes. Yes, I would say so, yes. Because linear programming isn't simulation, centre of gravity yet. They're awful, aren't they? But they're there. You would use computer software to do it. You'd put all your inputs in and it would do it for you. And that software you mentioned the other day was one of those softwares. Was it CRISP or something? Something like that. Yeah, something like that, aren't it? Yeah. And then they're on to risk management. Risk can come from, that's model I like, that it can come from the environment, it can come from within your processes, come from customers, suppliers, and how you control your processes. So 5 areas of risk there. That's the PEC model, I think, but it's a good model if you're stuck for sources of risk. What do we do? Identify, measure, manage, monitor, report risk. And the 4 T's: transfer, tolerate, treat, terminate. Pretty much done those several times. Collaborative planning and forecasting, so it's jumped down there. Is obviously, as the name suggests, if you work together with your customer, you're going to have better control of demand and supply if you collaborate on your forecasting and replenishment. So if you're having a promotion next month, it would help to share it with your supplier, and then you can jointly decide how many you're going to try and sell, how many you're likely to sell. So it's working together, trying to match supply with demand. It's about working strategically, monitoring control, and it's about reducing inventory. There's a link to ECR, efficient consumer response. So it's an important concept, I think. Not much more. Business process re-engineering. It's dramatic improvement, and it's not continuous improvement. It's about looking at things from scratch, radical thinking, dramatic improvements, short fat processes, control and action, and that's taken from the Slack textbook. Just looking if I put it in my notes. I've not explained the short fat stuff, but I know I've added, I'll check if I've sent you the added notes. I've added the detail of the short fat stuff into the notes there, Claire, but I'm not sure if I've put it in the notes that you've got.
No, I don't think there's anything about.
No, I think I'll resend those. Yeah, I'm just looking because I thought, oh, well, I think I'd gone down BPR as that, rethinking, strive for improvements, do that. And the study guide went for that. You can't be wrong, as we've said before, because they're both right, but I don't think I'd explained that slide in my notes. So I will send that. So BPR is fundamental.
When you send these slides across,
yeah,
do they have your notes on them?
There is like speaker's notes like that at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah.
I won't worry about sending me another study guide, because I've made notes and adjustments on this one to different things, and I'll have to start from scratch otherwise.
So if I send these, you can see the speaker's notes at the bottom, can't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think people get BPR. It's about looking at the processes again and making them customer facing and looking for dramatic improvements. So it's quite, it can lead to redundancies, major restructuring. So there's a lot of people critical of business process re-engineering. It can be seen as a once and for all cost-cutting exercise. It needs long-term commitment. And sometimes people are just automating rather than improving the process. And efficiency of one department might be improved at the expense of another. So there are limitations to it. I basically think it's all that because value stream mapping's replaced it. And if you do the current state and future state and then redesign your processes, that's BPR. So I think lean really is where BPR left off, and people now, if you do lean, you're looking at all your processes. But the study guide doesn't go down that avenue, but effectively it is. You're looking at why we're doing this, how could we do it better? Do we need this? What does the customer want? So BPR is named on the syllabus, so well worth learning. And then we're on to what I call the new stuff. It wasn't on the old syllabus. And this is taken from the textbook, Chopra, Liang, when I can find the stupid thing, it's somewhere in here, and I've lost it. Here it is, yeah. This is all taken from this textbook. Lost my camera on there, where's it gone?
Yeah, I'm just going to turn my camera off because it kept freezing, just so you know, I've switched myself off because it makes it a bit more stable.
No, that's fine. Mine should be showing somewhere, but it doesn't seem to want to show me the picture. So this last bit is mainly taken from Chopra and Mendel, and it's about customer supply chain uncertainty, capabilities, strategic fit, cost responsive frontier, responsive spectrum, zone of fit, and they're all named bullet points on your syllabus. Never been examined, any of them. So 4.4 hasn't been done. Fit, what is it? Matching their products. And it links to Gatona as well, strategic alignment, making sure that your supply chain matches the customer segment or customer behaviour. It's about matching needs. We need to understand the customer, understand the supply chain, what it's capable of, and make sure it fits. And we've got the Fisher demand uncertainty, which we did earlier. So products could be functional or innovative, and that might mean you might need a lean supply chain or an agile. So if demand's volatile, guess what? You need a responsive, agile supply chain. So it's not rocket science. So look into your supply chain, look at your customer demand and try and match it up. And that's the same one, functional, innovative products, it's the same one. Lee did an earlier version of it. Fashion products tend to be uncertain demand. Grocery products can be quite stable. So there are examples there of the different products. We need to understand the customer, lots, response time, service level, what they're looking for. We need to understand supply. And again, it's one size doesn't fit all. Defining customer demand. The study guide says we need to understand, guess what? Rather surprisingly, the quantity of products demanded, the response time, the variety, service levels, pretty standard. What do they want? How often do they want it? What variations do they want? So we need to understand customers and their demand. I quite understand why the study guide rabbits on for 2 pages about we need to maybe do target costing. Other than obviously we need to price products that are attractive to customers. So we might give suppliers target costs, or we might use target costing ourselves. Do market research, identify market, look at what product features are required, design it, determine value. So we've got to design products that fit a cost structure, or price break as they'd call it in marketing. So someone might say, well, I can sell a product like for this for £10. But if you're saying it's going to cost me 15, well, it's no go. So target costing can be helpful, matching up demand to supply. We need to define requirements. Again, what can one say? Right, so the important new concept is the cost responsive frontier, which means if we need high response, we need high productivity. Ignore the outside line, but we can be anywhere on the line there. If I can get this to slide show from current slide. So we've got, no, it's changed over. There is a there. So this is where we're at, the production frontier. So this is the frontier here, this first line. So it can be anywhere on here. And we've got trade-offs. We can have that much responsiveness, but that much productivity. Or we can have low responsiveness and high productivity, and that's it. So we've got trade-offs between cost and responsiveness. If we redesign the supply chain, we can increase everything. So we could now have that much responsiveness and that much productivity. So that's a new line. That's the existing line. So that's the cost responsive frontier. I think we did some frontiers in ops management. And responsiveness.
Seems quite new to me. That doesn't ring a bell.
Right. It's a concept from economics, is a frontier, and it represents the maximum that can be done at a point in time. So you've got a supply chain or manufacturing facility, and it can be that responsive. And if it's that responsive, that's the productivity cost. And if you plot all the combinations, you get a frontier. So basically you can say, well, if we only want to be 50% responsive, we can be much more productive. So it's plotting.
Trading off, isn't it? Really?
Yes, trade-off's the word. Yeah, trade-off.
What's more important to your profitability, like what's more important to your customers,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So you've got to make sure your supply chain can be responsive to, as your customer needs, but it could cost you on productivity.
Yeah.
So how responsive does your customer want? Well, they might want it highly efficient, or it could go right through to highly responsive. And you've got 4 different levels there, and that's in the study guide. Highly efficient, somewhat, pretty standard. And that leads to the zone of strategic fit, which is badly explained in the study guide, but it's the same as the trade-off, in that you need to be in here so that you've got a match between the, I don't like the word resilience, I'll go to this slide, how responsive you are needs to match the demand uncertainty. So you need to be within this zone here. So it is taking, I think, the cost-efficient frontier and putting it into a graph, basically. So you can either be very responsive or very efficient, but it depends on how certain your demand is. So if you've got certain demand here, there, very certain, you can have a very efficient supply chain. If your demand is very erratic, then you need a very, very erratic, you need a responsive supply chain. And that's it. And that's the zone of strategic fit. The study guide doesn't show that diagram from Shopper, but it explains it better. And again, I think, Claire, let's have a look here. Discard. Yeah, my notes are underneath there. So it does explain it okay in there. And if we go to the next slide, all functions must support competitiveness. You can either be efficient or responsive. There is no one strategy. There is a right strategy for a competitive strategy. So what strategy you adapt depends. How do we get, oh, sorry, that's the efficient versus responsive supply chain. That perhaps should be with the Fisher ones. So the goals of efficient or lean are that. And responsive or agile is the one on the right. Other things that affect fit, product life cycle, changeover of competitors, product segments. So how do we make the strategy fit? Well, the study guide goes down, one of my favourites is the McKinsey 7S framework. And you can see there are 7 S's. If a firm, to achieve fit, a firm must consider all strategies and everything must fit. If we go to this, it was developed in the 80s by Waterman and Peters, and it's to do with changing strategy. Everything's got to line up. So they're the 7 S's in detail: strategy, structure, system, skills. And what it's saying is some of those are hard, it's easy to see and measure. Some are more soft, touchy feeling, hard to quantify, skills, values, etc. And what we've got to do is align them. So for our supply chain has got to be aligned. The style or culture has got to match up to the systems and structure. Can you see that all those lines showing one thing links to another?
Yeah.
The video is very good on it, 5 minutes on it, and you'll get it, Claire. There's a link to supply chain 7 S's. So you can actually use this model to discuss strategic alignment. The study guide has it here on strategic fit. But
that's somewhere earlier in this syllabus, isn't it? That's
yes.
earlier on in this module.
Yes.
Yeah, it's earlier on in your notes, isn't it? Okay, yeah, cool.
So it's a good model you can bring into section 4, and it's easy to learn, but I definitely just watch the 5-minute videos as well. Obviously the culture should be in there, but it didn't fit with an S, but never mind. But it's an easy model, hard and soft, alignment, hard, and that's basically it. It's just remembering the 7 S's. I think, to be fair, Claire, in those notes you've got, I've moved it from earlier into 4.2 because I thought it fitted better in there, like the study guide. 4.4, sorry, 4.3 even.
I can't see it. Oh, yeah, it might be earlier in 4
Yeah,
point something.
I'll have a look, Bram. But basically, you can use it in 4.3 as strategic fit. So if you're making notes against the models, and I'll go there from slide 80 odd back up here.
No, there's not a lot of stuff on 4.3 in your notes, but I'm sure this is in one of the other learning outcomes earlier on.
I think it is, isn't it? Let's have a few slides properly. That's if I go to.
It might be in 1.4.
Yeah, and I've gone to.
Yeah, McKinsey 7S framework you've got in 1.4.
Yeah, I think the revised. Sorry, go to 4.4. Yeah, strategic fit. Restructure the supply chain. So that slide there, if you can see it, I think that's where you could use the 7S's there. Sorry, it's put and S. 7S. But it also fits strategic alignment because the model in the 1.4 is rubbish, that SAM model.
Yeah.
But you can think we've got the SAM model, we've got the 7S model, and we've also got that Gaetano and dynamic alignment, which was then 4 things, culture, leadership, strategy, and something else, markets, I think. So, right, so we've got 7S's, which isn't too bad, is it, to be honest? I think, no. The cost frontier's new. But again, view slide from current slides. Again, there's a nice video clip on that explains it somewhat. It hasn't come up before. So we'll get past the fit one. Using the 7S's, identify areas not aligned. Determine how you like the organised supply chain or organisation to be structured. What changes, make the changes, review the 7S's. And then there's a summary of the 7S's there. Quite easy to use, quite an easy model. And this word interdependent is key. And then we're into 4.5, which is pretty rubbish, but guess what? It gives you the answer. What are the challenges? And this is what your essay would say. More product variety, shrinking life cycles, globalization, fragmentation, changing technology, the environment and sustainability, and you'd write about each of those. And that would be your 25 marker. So if it came up as a high level one, as long as you knew the 5 bullets, you'd be all right. I can't see I'm asking 25 marks on a bullet in there. So it's pretty general, this. Issues with fit, product life cycle, competition, firms selling different products. We might have different supply chains. So one size doesn't fit all. So that's one way of, one of the challenges of having fit is making sure you've aligned your supply chain to the segment. Differentiation, variety can be a problem. So we need to perhaps do all that. We need to understand product life cycles, introduction, growth, maturity, and how it impacts on sales and demand. And there's a couple of life cycles and its impact on revenue. This is a very strange life cycle. Don't like that one. Product life cycle, competitive changes over time, globalization, nothing new. Globalization leads to uncertainty. I've got a reference there, Oakden 2018, and it talks about low-cost country sourcing, geographic dispersion, depth. Fragmentation is a good word to throw in. Less vertically integrated, more outsourced, more non-core activities, longer supply chains. Fragmentation leads to issues such as slave labour and human rights, fraud, you name it. It leads to risk. Supply chains are more complex. Technology is changing. There's a few buzzwords in there, RFID. In fact, it just repeats RFID, doesn't it? Nothing new there. And then sustainability, energy, reduce, reuse, recycle, efficiency. How do we get that balance between responsiveness and efficiency? Difficult. So challenges, shortening product life cycles, increasing customer demands, fragmenting supply chains, globalization, technology. So I've done some bullet points there, Claire, for key revision. There's little fact on 4.5. It's more general stuff. So fragmentation, demand, life cycles, etc. are all. Then if we go back to the first slide there, yeah. I can't see it ever being more than a 25 marker on the general. Discuss the challenges for a company of your choice achieving and maintaining strategic fit or something. So you'd have to say what strategic fit was, and you'd have to talk about the challenges.
Has it been examined, you know?